Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So, Alliance or Horde, two factions with two unique stories split across two continents, one for each. Many of us are torn. I mean, come on, do we sign up with the genocidal maniacs or the good cinnamon roll boy? Jokes aside, it is bloody hard to know where we want to go in this expansion. There is more diversity in content and story than ever before between the factions, so today what we're going to do is a spoiler-free deep dive into this expansion that should help you work out what you want to play first. But before that, Before the Storm covers the run-up to this expansion from the perspective of Anduin and Silvanus. It really helps us understand where these characters are coming from, and more importantly, by being a book, it gives us their internal monologue, which is something you won't see in the game. And today's video is sponsored by Audible, and if you sign up with Audible, you can get a free audiobook, which is perfect for picking up Before the Storm, which has just released today, and more on them later. So, it's hard to know where to start with this video, so you know what, let's just go with the beginning. The Burning of Teldrassil and Battle for Lordaeron are major events that have been talked about a lot, but a lot of the really important context is entirely missing. They both have gaps where cinematics should play, which means that the full conclusions are completely missing. Think back to the Broken Shore and how its cinematic pretty much contained all the important information. So, I would recommend withholding judgment on these and what the factions do until we have full context, which is going to happen with the pre-patch, and I imagine Blizzard has something pretty damn spicy in store for us. But with that covered, it's time to talk about the real meat of the expansion. Kul Tiras and Zandalar. These are two big, epic continents that are actually very different and will almost certainly appeal to different players. So Kul Tiras is one of the most immersive regions in the game. The work the Blizzard's level designers have done here is just fantastic. Now, the zones they're quite large and open, which means you always have this big, sprawling view. The region itself is spread out around a central lake, which means that you can pretty much always see each zone from every other zone. We then have massive mountains which dominate the skyline, and all of this makes navigation really easy because you are hooking in, or they are hooking in, to how we naturally navigate the real world by using big landmarks. This has the effect of making the zone very, very immersive, and that's without talking about the incredible work that the art team have done and the many great weather effects and stuff. We then have Borealis, which, you know what, it might not be as fantastical as Suramar City, but it certainly does feel like a more immersive and believable place. They just do a great job of, representing the Kul Tiran nation in general, and it's just really well realized across the three zones. Now, Zandalar is a different kettle of fish. First, it demos really well. There are so many astoundingly cool set pieces that have rocked it in trailers. The downside, though, is that it's not a good representation of how it overall is. Now, I mentioned how Kul Tiras is typically quite wide open, navigable, results in it being quite natural and immersive like a real place, while two of the three Zandalari zones feel kind of like Legion zones in that they're quite dense and they feel like a series of interconnected gameplay hubs. Nazmir mostly gets away with this, but Zuldazar really suffers. While it looks cool, I do think that Zuldazar is one of the worst designed zones in the game in a few years, actually. Now, that's me talking about level design. Story is an entirely different kettle of fish, much to the Horde's benefit. The Horde storyline is fast-paced. It's got interconnected narratives that all feel really immediate. We have a massive traditional threat mixed up with big political power plays, and it's just really cool, and they managed to make the Zandalari characters really shine. And it also helps that the Horde storyline is tightly connected to the first raid of the expansion, which again helps to make everything feel more urgent. I don't want to go into spoilers, but the Horde storyline is really brilliant. Now, while the Alliance may have the better continent in my view, they struggle narratively in comparison. So, Stormsong Valley, it does have an hour or two long segment that lives up to the best of what the Horde campaign offers, but the general pace is a good bit slower. There is less of a sense of urgency and seemingly more in the way of side quests, which are a mixed bag. Some of them are great for world building, but others are just plain boring. Now, this is more spread out and it's a more ponderous nature overall. What it does do is it helps to build up the Kul Tiran people. So while chilling out in the estate is not the pinnacle of intensive gameplay, it actually is a really well-paced aside that beefs out the world and its people. Overall, though, I think the Horde, they win the narrative contest, but the Alliance win the continent one. But that's not really the entire picture, because as you level up, you'll be taking part in your faction's war campaign. So the war campaign involves you setting up a foothold in the other faction's continent, and that's pretty cool because it gives you a taste of their storylines, but from another perspective. Then once you hit max level, you're going to be doing your world quests across both continents. So regardless of faction choice, you do get a taste of everything. But let's talk about the state of the factions themselves by the time we actually hit BFA. Suffice to say, this topic, well, there's been a little bit of discussion about it. Let's kick it off with the Alliance. So far, they have been almost entirely inoffensive. I mean, sure, they've done the odd bad thing here or there, but overall, and especially when compared to the modern Horde, there is not much in the way of stuff that would cause a player to question their character's actions. Now, the Alliance have been, I think they're very homogeneous, I'd say. Now, they're mostly all quite good, but because the humans play such a key role in their leadership, the racial diversity of the Alliance has really fallen to the wayside, which is kind of sad because, once again, I would love to see the Night Elves act in the way that they did, say, in Warcraft 3. Now, all of this means that they're not particularly exciting, but it's also hard to get annoyed by them. Now, on the character front, Anduin is actually great. He has developed a lot since his introduction, where I actually didn't like him that much, but especially when you take the external media stuff into account, he really is shaping up well. Seeing him take up the, just step up to the plate, take on the burden of leadership, that's genuinely interesting, especially when you sort of see him harden to the threats of the world. And really, it's easy to be a pacifist when you're the only person who will face the repercussions, and that's something that's being explored. Then Gen, of course, is a interesting character. He's got some, I think, good moments in this expansion, but overall, they do feel kind of homogeneous. There's little in the way of Marty Gray actions, and it's not massively exciting. But that said, it's a very, very clear and simple pillar to rally behind, right? There's just the feeling of being righteous and a good guy. That's kind of what the Alliance still does feel like. As for the Horde, well, it's quite different. They have a more diverse leadership that's got more internal conflict. Now, this generally allows for more interesting character-driven storylines, and they also carry a rather unsubtle thematic edge because the Horde characters generally represent their race as a whole. Now, this is something I would normally go to war on in media. I mean, just look at the post-release criticisms of a film like Crash, but for the purposes of World of Warcraft, it does the job. Now, it has traditionally been the strength of Horde storytelling that there has been this conflict, but Blizzard have somewhat weakened that by pacifying a few characters and then having the Forsaken really take up a leadership role, with Silvanus being the one who orders you and Nathanos kind of being your handler. The Forsaken, they were always outsiders to the Horde, so I can see many Horde players feeling a little bit alienated with this new direction. Now, as for the characters, well, Silvanus and Saurfang stand out. I actually think Silvanus is a great character. Unfortunately, many don't because they don't know her full story, because Blizzard have not really told it that well in-game. But still, she is well motivated and interesting on paper. However, Blizzard have struggled with her execution, and they unfortunately straddle the line of her coming off like a cartoon villain from time to time. They're not successfully selling her as the leader of the Horde, only as the leader of the Forsaken, even though canonically, according to the book, she's actually quite popular with the Horde populace. Now, this is again going to alienate some people, but Saurfang, while he's probably the most interesting character in BFA, he is a storyline the traditional Horde players will absolutely love, though it doesn't seem to progress that far over the course of 8.0 from what I've seen. So, if you want to be 100% behind your faction and have a faction that's a massive, epic, unified front that's kind of simple, the Alliance is going to match that. If you want a faction that's got more internal conflict and more moral ambiguity, then the Horde is probably going to match that in BFA. I would say that the Horde has more potential for kind of adult storytelling, more politics, character drama, but I'm not sure if I trust Blizzard to execute on that, so I wouldn't really count on it when making a decision. It does feel like the Horde is going through a time of struggle, which is expressed in them not feeling like they have a unifying theme for players to rally behind and feel proud of, whereas with the Alliance, it is clear and simple, but it's appealing and does the job. Now, as for features, well, they're all open to both factions with the exception of the allied races. Really, with the allied races, it's just about what visuals you like. From my perspective, both factions come off equally. Okay, so all of this pondering is fine, but what am I actually going to do? Well, I'm playing both factions. I don't have a choice. It's a part of my job. But if I was only playing one, it would probably be the Alliance because I love the world of Kulturas, and for me the campaign and the story won't factor in much past the first week of the expansion, though if I was playing from only a narrative focus, I would absolutely pick Horde. Now, if you want a more in-depth look at the faction narrative, then I would recommend checking out Before the Storm on today's sponsor, Audible. If you follow the link, you'll get a free audiobook for life, which includes Before the Storm, which releases on the very same day as this video. You can cancel at any time, and your library will still be accessible. It will be yours. So they really are, in this case, giving you a free book, and they're hoping you enjoy the service. Before the Storm really sets up Anduin and Silvanus as characters. It explains where they're coming from, and you'll almost certainly enjoy the expansion more if you go into it knowing these character just motivations. Audible also have most of the Warcraft library, of the recent stuff, including War Crimes, Proudmoore, and in the US, Illidan, which is a really great read for Legion. But yeah, there you go. So Audible, you can check them out in the link down below, and it really helps out the channel. So there we go, and BFA really has been dramaed on narratively, and I think a lot of that drama is actually kind of fair, but I am really excited for this era of Blizzard storytelling. We have no idea where this expansion is going to go past the Uldir raid. That's so much more interesting than knowing the villain of the expansion before the beginning of the expansion and just going through the motions until we get there. BFA is poised to have twists and turns in the narrative that can really be events for the community, that can push forward the lore of the Warcraft universe rather than just filling it in. There'll be bumps along the way, of course, but I think the potential in this new direction is so much higher than the old one. So, that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about the factions down below in the comments. Massive thank you to the patrons for all of their help and support as well. And yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.